as it is the desire of every Christian to seek spiritual fulfillment by joining prayer groups, a church, or identifying themselves with a particular faith and believers. This was not different for Mugumo village. In the quiet village of Mugumo, there lived a brilliant and inquisitive young woman named Stella. She was the only daughter of Margaret, who had remained a widow after her husband had died of a road accident. The two lived together. Stella had taken a career in journalism and was currently enrolled in a nearby college, which her mother struggled to pay due to her declining health. Margaret had been diagnosed with Joint's disease, which she had used a lot of money to treat. Unluckily, she had not fully recovered, and she would often visit a nearby clinic for treatment. Stella, a hard-working girl, was her mother's pride. She worked part-time milk vendor to support her ailing mother and herself. In Mugumo village, everyone lived in unison. The villagers drew water from the same well, grazed their animals in the same fields, and women often went to the forests to fetch firewood, and young men played volleyball in a small field after work. Moses, a young ambitious and religious man hailing from Mugumo village, would walk around preaching. He claimed to have a gift to heal the sick, and had often prayed with Margaret, and both believed that in God's time she would get well. Soon enough, Moses opened a church, which he named Signs and Wonders Church. Everyone in the community was hesitant at first to join the church. But Moses kept preaching. As other young men were busy working on their farms or grazing their cattle, Moses often walked from one homestead to another preaching and praying for the sick. Pastor Moses preached loudly, dressed sharply, and spoke with authority. His voice carried confidence, and his words sounded holy. After a short while, word spread like wildfire about Moses' church. People were being healed, and cripples would walk. Out of curiosity, everyone in the community wanted to witness the happening of the church, with little consideration of Matthew 7 verse 15, which warns Christians to be careful of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. The community also forgot that not every miracle is from God, and not every voice that says, "Lord," is from God. Discernment is a gift from God which every Christian should strive to have, as it is written in Matthew 24:24 that false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. Most people in the community abandoned their previous churches and joined Moses' church with the hope to get financial breakthroughs, physical healing, and miracles. The congregants were often told to give money so that the money could multiply and their businesses would grow. But something was amiss about the church. Stella was keen to note that only a few people would get healed. She often wondered why her mother's illness kept deteriorating. Some congregants were advised to quit taking their medications, which worsened their health, while others kept giving their monies to the church, with the hope to regain their health back. At this time, Pastor Moses had begun to note the doubt in his congregants' faces. He had joined other pastors from other areas, the ones he admired healing power and ability to drive out demons. Pastor Moses began being obsessed with creating a big name, collecting more offerings in church, and being highly respected like the men of God he admired. But instead of him soaking into prayer and fasting, reading the Bible and seeking God, he was advised by his senior pastors to join a cult group that would make him rich and bring more congregants in church. But this was not going to be without a cost. Any power not given by God always demands a price. Pastor Moses would often visit the graveyard at night, where he would draw his powers from. He would also buy water from the mortuary, which he would sell to congregants as miracle water. This went on for a while. The unsuspecting congregants would buy the water from the church, pour it in their businesses hoping to increase their sales. But this only led them into problems. Some could no longer sustain their businesses, so they closed them down. The sick who used the water bought from church, their sicknesses deteriorated, while some who Pastor Moses laid hands on in prayer, they began to experience different struggles, as if an evil spirit was deposited in them. Stella and her mother Margaret had held on prayer and remained steadfast in faith that the ailment on Margaret would vanish as a result of Pastor Moses' prayers. But this was far from the truth. Stella began reading the Bible, and she often noted that in church, the main preaching was about material prosperity and not repentance or giving to the poor. Stella remained inquisitive. Although her curiosity was not well received by most congregants, some joined her in questioning the happenings. Through her reading the Bible, Stella's mind was opened. Her doubts regarding the church grew, and she decided to join hands with a few people in the community to find out Pastor Moses' routine. At this time, Pastor Moses had become wealthy. He walked around with bodyguards, bought a pistol, and could travel around with other renowned gospel ministers for ministry. Stella and other congregants kept an eye on Pastor Moses, trying to find out the truth. Sometimes the congregants followed him afar during the day, while others stuck closely to his house to observe if there would be any strange visitor coming to his house. This did not go very long. One night, while they were watching, Pastor Moses walked out of his house, dressed in pure black clothes, headed to a nearby cemetery, where he sat down and begun to light candles in the dark, and begun to speak to unseen people. This terrified Stella and other congregants. A strong wind blew, but they had to stay still and complete the observation. After Pastor Moses was done at the graveyard, he headed to a nearby mortuary, where they observed him being handed a jerrycan of water. They were so shocked. This was the same water he would use sell to them in church. Without wasting any more time, they decided to confront him. They were so furious, they were about to stone him. Pastor Moses did not have an option but to tell the truth. He broke down, fell on his knees, and cried out, begging for mercy. Pastor Moses said that he wanted to be great, respected, and had got tired of waiting on God. Stella and other congregants were relieved. They let Pastor Moses go unharmed. But it was time to tell the congregants the truth. Several people came out to say that the miracles were staged. They were paid to fall during prayer. The testimonies were also organized. On hearing this, the church leadership decided to close the Signs and Wonders Church. Moses was removed from leadership and placed under care and legal review for fraud. Stella and the congregants were glad they pursued the truth. This story is an eye-opener to every Christian, that these are the last days. So many men of God are deceiving congregants with fake miracles and testimonies. The best thing to do is knowing God for yourself and seeking God in prayer, without depending on a man of God to present your request to God on your behalf. Remember in Mark 15 verse 38, after Jesus breathed his last, the veil of the temple was torn into two from top to bottom, meaning we all can take ourselves to God in prayer. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave us a comment if you have been inspired by today's story.